Well, in the Marble Room, I'm pleased to invite Clara Volintiru, the Regional Director of the German Marshall Fund of the US, to give her the floor to start the next panel session on financial markets and regional resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirala. And you weren't very, very wrong, because in the past years, I've took this stage as a representative of the Aspen Institute. So I'm very happy to be here today as part of the German Marshall Fund. And I'm very happy to take on moderation of this important panel. It's a conversation we have every year about economic convergence and economic growth. And probably no year has been as difficult to tackle this subject as it is now, with geopolitical tensions and inflation and uncertainty. But I'm fairly certain our wonderful panel will do justice to the topic and will help us steam ahead. Financial markets and regional resilience, with Natalia Gavrilița, member of the Supervisory Board of the National Bank of Moldova and former Prime Minister of the Republic of Moldova and former Minister of Public Finances, and fierce economist, I might add. Thank you so much, Natalia, for joining us. Mr. Jan Ruziska, Chief External Affairs CEO of the PPF Group. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel. Hello, Jan. Marcelo Pascual Morales, General Manager, MSD Romania and the Republic of Moldova. Thank you so much, Marcelo, for joining us. Cristian Giannaliu, Executive Director, Global Markets at Garanti Bank. Yet another financial perspective. And last but not least, Mr. Karel Lanuch, Chief Executive Officer of the Center for European Policy Studies. And I'm sure many of you interested in economic topics have managed to read one of his op-eds in Financial Times, one of the fiercest advocates for capital union in the European Union. After giving a little bit away of our discussion today, because the timing is short and the panel is fantastic, what I would propose is that we first do a round of inputs on the conversation of how do we manage growth in Central and Eastern Europe, how do we bring about capital, and what do we need to do to prosper. Natalia, you have the floor first. Ladies first.
Is this on? Yes, it is. It's great to be here and participate in this discussion. We are living in very turbulent times, but our decisions today, I'm certain, will dictate how the equilibrium will settle for the next decades. So I think it's very important to be brave, to be thoughtful, and to take decisions that will make us proud later on. I think we need to concentrate. We talk a lot about geopolitics. At the same time, I have never seen anything that brings so much progress on all indicators, and particularly on problems that are important for our regions like governance, than economic growth. So I think the key question is how, through these turbulent times, we maintain, revive growth, and also set up the competitiveness in a way that will bring us the economic benefits in the future. And of course, I cannot avoid talking about Moldova. Moldova is going through a turbulent time economically. So even though we are not directly involved in the military conflict, we are facing a full-fledged hybrid war. And we are doing all of this while facing a profound stagflation. I think some European countries do not realize, because even though they have inflations, but still we have seen some growth, we have seen some sort of positive macroeconomic trends. We are concerned about competitiveness, but the situation in Moldova is much different. So we've had a contraction in growth, high inflation, and our potential for growth was weak even before the war. So now that we are, candidate country to the European Union, and hopefully in December we will have the decision of the Council that will agree with the recommendation of yesterday's the Commission statement. So the question is, how do we revive growth? And the key is investment. Even if it's so difficult right now, we need to think about ways how private companies can still invest their capital in Moldova, can open up new production sites, can create jobs, and give some positive outlook for the future. And how do we do that? Because everybody's saying, oh, well, we'll come back to you. We're very impressed with what you're doing, but we'll come back to you after the war. So the question, the key question, and maybe we can discuss it here, well, how do we do it now? And you know, I think the topic is financial instruments. I think we need to think about, you know, what makes the current financial instruments insufficient to mitigate the risks of private companies. So I was talking to the World Bank, for example, about MEGA guarantees, but then some private investors are saying, well, but they are too expensive. They're, you know, the administrative burden is high. So what is it? What type of instruments do we need in order to guarantee for political risk, for currency risk, for, you know, provide war insurance? What do we need to do to create some dynamic for investment? Moldova is doing, I think, extraordinary reforms. Nobody expected Moldova to punch above its weight in such a way, and it would be a big, big lost opportunity if we don't keep this momentum and we don't have this translate into specific investment and specific benefits to our people. Because if we don't show these benefits, we remain very vulnerable to Russian propaganda, disinformation, and disillusion with the European future. And finally, just last comment, again, we need to think together. Perhaps people just don't know. So perhaps we need more information, more events where we say, you know, what is our industrial policy? Which sectors do we think are potential for growth? Where have we created regulatory reform? So we were just talking in the back about the pharmaceuticals industry. You know, we have a great university with good value for money, so we have international students as well, and we are regaining some competitiveness because of the change in the logistic chains and so on. But what do we need? What type of numbers do we need? What type of analysis and what type of communications with the right companies do we need to convince them that even though it's difficult now, the time to invest is now, because tomorrow we might not have this chance. So it's not just about governments taking decisions, it's about everybody, including the private sector, realizing this is a key geopolitical moment that we need to use together. So let's think what type of instruments, what type of decisions, what type of communication we need in order to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. Jan, I think you can pick it up from there. You saw a very forceful governmental stance. Now, how is it in the private sector?
And I think rightly so. Let me start with some positivity. And we are sometimes too skeptical and too negative. So we as a PPF, we are a large investor in every single Southeast European country, from Moldova to Slovenia. We have 10,000 employees here, more than 30 companies, telecommunication, media, ProTV here, to do a little bit of our marketing as a media partner. We have e-commerce, real estate, and so on. And we are happy here. We are very happy here, even with $1 billion invested. We would like to do more. Why? Because we see a lot of success. Madam Prime Minister said about Moldovan reforms. Definitely. Moldova and Albania, the pace of how quickly you are doing acquis communautaire, the harmonization of legislation is unbelievable. And I'm saying as a former civil servant in my country. Second, 3 good projects. Everybody remember 10 years ago, Greece, a problem. Now, I don't see a problem. I see great future potential, not only economically, but Prime Minister Mitsotakis is doing a lot of stuff also in the region. Croatia, Andrej Plenković and his government, they are in the European Union just 10 years. And they have Schengen, Eurozone, they are using subsidies right. Just look on their infrastructure, their highways, great. Third one, definitely Romania. We are a big, sizable investor here, and we see how quickly country is pacing to the West. And at the end, it doesn't matter who from the big party is a prime minister, because you are rotating quite quickly here. But everybody is pro-Western values, so this is great. So this is positive. Negativity, and you a little bit touch it. You don't have enough marketing here. Nobody knows about Southeast Europe in Washington. A lot of bankers believe that Europe ends in Berlin. This is it. And sometimes European big recommendations and papers, they are not, you cannot touch them. You cannot touch them. And if I would be giving advice to governmental leaders in the region, so whenever you are going to Brussels, also step to Frankfurt and talk to bankers. If you go to Washington and New York, not only go to State Department, go to meet John Dugan from Citi, go to meet Tim Adams from International Institute of Finance, because his CRM is full of bankers, and bring them here. You need to bring more bankers here, because what they believe that you are subscale. They believe, hey, Bucharest, it's so close to Ukraine. Will I be safe there? Probably not. Third, you need to work as a region. And I see positivity here in energy sector, for example, as well. So Moldova, it was a headache last winter for our guys there, but I think we managed pretty well. And now it needs to work Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, and again Greece, and it's working. So I call it from Alexandroupolis, LNG, to Kishinev. So basically, we need to kill this Cold War mentality when everything was east-west, west-east, Iron Curtain. So we need more connectivity south-north. One direction I just showed. Second one is Balkan 6, Hungary, Slovenia, and Central Europe. So we need more of this, and there are great infrastructure projects. It's possible to get institutional financing. Even Moldova, another success. EBRD, EIB, both present. USAID giving money for real projects, not only for, and I don't want to smear it, only for value projects or, you know, Western philosophy, but real stuff happening on the ground. And you guys, governments, and both of us capital investors, we need to drag this kind of money. Renewable energy, then you need calibration and balancing power. That's why we need to have, again, Greece and Turkey for gas. The same, we need better highways, we need better infrastructure. These are big capital-intensive projects, and for sure we need capital union, for sure. Because it will be good for guys in Frankfurt and Berlin and Paris, but it's much more better for us. It's like European Union. Yes, it would be nice to have our own independence in the region, but then without union, you know, money won't flow so easy. So this is my, not negativity, but, you know, I would say a recommendation. Better marketing, work as a team, also as a region for big strategic project, because then you are not subscale anymore. You know, pipes from Greece to Moldova, it's big money, it's a big project. The same highways, the same transport. So these kind of capital allocations, it can work, and then to combine European funds, institutionals, and us as a private business. And not only from Central Europe, we are from Prague, Czech Republic, but you need guys from Frankfurt, London, and New York.
Thank you so much, Jan. I hope you all took notes, because that was one of the most comprehensive guides to attracting foreign direct investments from the largest capital holder in Central and Eastern Europe. But then again, it's not just about capital or a material capital, is it? It's also about the human resource. And many times foreign direct investment asks this: is there a labor force? How does it look like? So that's why I think it's so fitting in this panel, Marcelo, to share with us what it is we should be doing to provide a productive labor force in the region.
Thank you, Clara, for the invitation, and thank you, Aspen, for organizing this forum. I love the passion of my colleagues here on the panel. I want to bring healthcare and the relevance of healthcare, not just to increase work productivity, but to drive prosperity and a strong economy in the countries. We were talking about turbulence. We just gone through the pandemic. We want to forget about that, but it was recent, 2 years ago. One of the main learnings of that is when healthcare is at risk, we are all at risk. So we should be, and we should see the investment in healthcare not as a cost, but as an investment to drive prosperity in the economies. And in this turbulence time, we need to build on resilience, on healthcare, right? And healthcare that will be able to be flexible and adaptable to the different crises that we may go through. So I want to build on 3 key elements. to build a resilient healthcare, which I think are going to be important for Romania in particular, but for the entire Eastern European countries. The first one is around accelerate access of innovation. And to give you context of that, I will talk about another pandemic, which is cancer, which impact many of our families here or our friends. In Romania, more than 100,000 cases are diagnosed every year. 1 out of 2 is in people which is less than 65, so workforce. And if you think about the impact, and this is a study done by the coordination of Clara, more than 3% of the GDP is the cost of inaction on cancer. This is the entire budget allocation for education here in Romania. Think about that. So what is the role of innovation here? Just recently, a few years ago, immuno-oncology therapies came as a solution for patients. On the latest stage, bringing and redefining the hope and the expectancy for survival. Now these therapies are available in the early stage for many patients, which is not just about redefining survival expectations, but it's also about cure and the ability to bring this workforce back to work much earlier. So Romania has done a great job advancing in cancer care in the last few years. We are still seeing inequalities, not just in Romania, but in many Eastern European countries around access to these therapies, especially in the early stage. And especially, in areas like triple-negative breast cancer, which is impacting many women here who are on those age where they can be productive. So access to innovation, access early, and then close that gap is going to be one of the key elements to build this resilience in healthcare. That's an element where public and private institutions and stakeholders will need to work together to close that gap. The other element that I want to talk about to build on this element of health resilience is about prevention, right? And obviously, most of you know, and all the economists know, every euro that you invest in prevention, the return of investment is 2 to 4 euro. So a population that is well educated, has access to prevention and to vaccination, and has access to service in a short term will bring prosperity also to the country. I want to acknowledge also here in Romania 2 important milestones. The approval of the National Oncology Plan, which will bring a lot of improvement in the disease management of oncological patients and shorter, ideally, the time to access to therapy, the time to get more hope for their lives, and also the approval of the vaccination strategy, which the government has done recently, and again, will bring a lot of value in terms of prevention for many people and the communities here in Romania and also in Eastern European countries. The third pillar that I want to mention around building resilience in healthcare, and it's the most important one, because without this pillar, there won't be anything else, is the funding. So to build a healthcare resilient system, you need a resilient funding as well. When you look at the data, in Eastern European countries, we are lagging behind by far. Specifically in Romania, the GDP investment in healthcare is 6% versus the average of 9% in Europe. So there is an important gap to close. We just talked about the importance of prevention. GDP per capita is €8 in Romania versus 72 in Europe. So obviously, if you think about that, right, and we talk about the cost of inaction, investment in healthcare will bring prosperity, will bring improvement in the work availability of the workforce in the countries, and will be an important factor. We as MSD has been operating here in Romania for more than 30 years. More than 400,000 people in this country is benefit from many of our portfolio here across many diseases. And we are committed to continue partnering with the private, but also public stakeholders to bring value and to put tools in place to drive that value, not just with our therapies, but also with clinical trials, with education, and also to cover some of the gaps that there are today in the system where private can play a role. So healthcare, if you think about how it can be a sign of prosperity, this data is an open eyes of how this can drive the next level here in Romania and Eastern European countries. Thank you.
So governmental marketing, private capital investments, a healthy and educated labor force. How do we achieve resilience in Central and Eastern Europe?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And thank you for the energy to my panel colleagues. It's outstanding. Talking about the subject that we talked before and talking about resilience, the first thing that I could find is the capital. The capital that in the case of Romania, it's actually coming, and we are seeing a lot of products or a lot of ways in which the money are coming to Romania as an investment or as a funding. The easiest possible way to think, it's the remittances, which basically are coming to the CE countries because people are staying abroad and are working and sending the money home. But we also have the FDI, and also comparing with Moldavia, all the CE 11, they have an advantage of not being exactly on the, I mean, they are on the periphery of the war, but not exactly in the middle, because I would say that Moldavia is quite in the middle. And then we have some other instruments that we have as Romania, as a part of European Union. We have the multi-annual program, and here it's a pity that we are not collecting all the money which we should collect on the multi-annual program. Hopefully, the next one is going to be successful. Unfortunately, for the 2014-2020 program, we are going to lose about 5 billion euro, which would be an important amount for other countries in the area. Also, I should mention that we have the Next Generation program, which it's helping Romania a lot. Talking about resilience per se, the CE 11 are having several advantages, not only funding, but also in case of monetary policy, we have an advantage for still having the monetary policy here in Romania and the foreign exchange adjustment here in Romania, comparing with the rest of the countries. So in an unfortunate event of idiosyncratic scenario, definitely the banks, the central bank in CE 11 are coping very well with this. What else I should mention about what I have seen as resilience that is prepared by the CE countries? We are seeing in the loans that the customers are requiring to the bank. First of all, I'm talking about the green energy, and here it applies not only for Romania but applies for the rest of the CE countries, and then achieving the independence, the energetic independence. Secondly, what we have noticed on the customer demand, it's new products, new sectors that they are applying, and they are trying to develop a certain business. Some of them used to be in Romania before the pre-communist era, and lately we are seeing them coming back and trying to improve it and make it happen again. And this creates, again, this diversification creates a resilience against the dependency on the sources coming from different countries. Last but not least, I will mention that there are certain untapped areas, both from the perspective of sectors that should grow in Romania, but also from the perspective of funding. And here I'm referring to the most of the items that I already mentioned, plus an additional item is the extra liquidity that we are seeing in the Romanian banking system. And that extra liquidity, it's waiting the customer to come and develop some businesses. We are hopefully that next year we are going to see lower rates, which will, let's say, boost the credit activity, and That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Karel, how do we make sense of this emerging dimension of different financing instruments, different demands, different products, and the need for a consolidated market, capital union in the European Union, consolidated markets in the range of the receiving countries? Tell us your thoughts on the matter.
Thanks, Clara, and a pleasure to be here. Good to be back here. In my case, it was a long time ago. I was in Romania, but we've been involved here, as I was saying to some people a moment ago, in approximation of laws exercises, preparing Romania to become a member of the EU. And if you see where Romania is today to what I experienced at the time, which I think must have been 2003, 2004, here, preparing the country for what is going to come, it's a big change. And that you can see overall in Central and Eastern Europe. If you you know this thing, I follow your line. We should say what the positive things, what has been realized in Central and Eastern Europe over the last basically 20 years. They are no longer new member states. They have been members for 20 years, Romania and Bulgaria a bit less, but it's enormous. I often, for example, compare Ukraine and Poland, which in the beginning of the 90s had more or less the same level of GDP per head. And today Poland is 5 times richer than the average Ukrainian, which is, sorry to say, thanks to EU enlargement and to the massive transfer of funds which have come from the EU. And that's basically what we will be doing again now with Moldova and Ukraine, probably also later with Georgia, because of what has been decided yesterday. So decided yesterday, the Commission has decided yesterday, we will start accession negotiation, or we propose this to the heads of state and government that they decide in December to do the accession negotiation, to open it, so to do this approximation of laws exercise with Ukraine, with Moldova, to prepare them for enlargement. And you know, some target dates are 2030, that is what is circulating in Brussels. Others are saying, no, this is too early. This could not be the case. But you will see simply a repetition for what we have seen for these countries, for Ukraine and Moldova, let's hope. And in Georgia, don't forget Georgia, which is far away, meaning towards the east. We also said yesterday, or say the Commission said also yesterday, Georgia should become a candidate country, because a year ago they said, no, Georgia is not ready. Now they have changed their mind. So this is a big change, and that's the overall positive story as well, which we have to be aware of. Because of this war in the east, Europe has moved eastwards, and the interest in Europe has moved eastward. We have realized in Western Europe that we were far too much oriented towards the West, meaning I'm coming from Brussels, UK, France, you're basically Western Europe. We now realize, let's say, how important Central Europe is, how important Eastern Europe is for Europe, but also the stability. And that is, I think, extremely important. We just elected at CEPS a new chairwoman of our board, Ela Benkowska. She's a former deputy prime minister of Poland, just to give a sign. And that is what we need to do, just show, look, Europe is not only Western Europe, the initial members of the EU, it is the larger Europe which is today, and we will further enlarge. And this is not only, of course, Ukraine and Moldova, maybe Georgia, but also the Western Balkans, which are basically tiny economically, but we also need to create stability in this part of the world. I was this morning in the car with somebody who was rather pessimistic. Europe is not doing its effort. Let's say in 2 to 3 years, Putin will be there with a huge army, will overwhelm Europe. Europe is not doing its defense effort. I disagree with this. Europe is investing lots of money into this, and we published just a paper, you can find it on our website, saying that the amounts which, by the way, the European Parliament and the Commission have proposed to be injected in Ukraine and Moldova in the next 4 years until 2030, it's about 12 billion per year, for example, for Ukraine. We only need a few billions more to really have a good package. And that these amounts could come from, also private sector funding, but there are other funds which we're speaking of. We're speaking about the frozen assets from Russia. There are private sector funds. There are Brady bonds, all kinds of things, let's say, which will be invested in the region. I think overall we have to be aware, let's say, that this war has woken up Western Europe, that we have to be aware what's going on in the East. It has taken us some time, a bit probably too much time, but it's certainly very strongly there, and the willingness to do something about this is there. And that is more the macro picture. On financial markets, my second point, also there, if you're here in the region, if you see what a single market has done for the region, opening up this region to mostly Western European banks. I know here in this country, most of the countries have mostly a dominance by Western European banks, but that's thanks to a single set of rules which are basically there. I know they are not perfect, and we are still discussing some fine-tuning here and there. Certainly for capital markets, it doesn't function sufficiently well, but overall, let's say, thanks to having banks, they have invested in companies, they have given credits, they have allowed, let's say, this enormous economic growth which you've seen in this region, which I know, again, expect to be the same for Moldova and Ukraine. On capital markets, the big problem is, however, that, I don't think we have found the solution to do it. And I think there we probably need a new narrative, because in Brussels we're thinking what should happen for the next European Commission. That's the big thinking, or what should the next European Parliament do. And that's why I think we need to have somewhere a new narrative, because certainly the capital market union, it has not worked. I mean, we have a huge regulatory process, but basically we're losing out towards the United States, for sure. Let's say the IPOs and so on are going to the US. I heard a figure, for example, on Tuesday, only 3% of global IPOs in tech business are happening in Europe. 3%. Can you imagine how scandalous this is? Let's say basically all flocking to the US. And what is the reason for this is, amongst others, Brexit. I mean, we basically have come into a lose-lose situation. Our biggest financial center in Europe is London. It's, by the way, the second or the first global financial center in the world. But we're basically pestering, the EU is pestering the UK, we cannot have this with the UK, we cannot have that, and all the business has to come to the EU. Like, for example, for clearing, for banks, they need to have a separate license in the EU. We don't have hardly any equivalence with the UK, meaning equivalence means, let's say, if you have business, you have a license there, you can do the business here. No, we don't do it, and we don't want to do it with the UK. What is the result? We're losing both. And it's about time, let's say, that the policymakers in Brussels realize this, and that they say, look, that's not good. Of course, we didn't like the UK leaving, but basically it's not good for us as well. We need to cooperate again, because certainly for capital markets, we need the UK, and the UK, even after Brexit, continues to be a very thriving financial market. Fourth element, which I wanted to say, long-term investment. You speak about deposits, savings, far too much on bank accounts. We don't have a capital market because there is insufficient supply of funds. People keep their money, certainly even with high inflation, on their deposits, which bring in probably 1%, there is 10% inflation, you lose a lot. You could have invested long-term in capital markets, but these funds in Europe are not sufficiently attractive. They're far too fragmented. They are far too costly. They are intransparent. I mean, there is a proposal on the table in Brussels on what they call the retail investment strategy. I think we need to have much more transparency and also much more consolidation in fund markets in Europe, and much more availability for long-term saving for Europeans, which I think is extremely important, because certainly if you look long-term, not only Eastern Europe or Central Europe, but also the whole of Southern Europe is insufficiently investing for the old age, and most people will be worse off once they are retired than what they are earning today. So it's only basically the Nordics which have good systems to invest long-term, and which will be rich in their old age. Most of the countries will be poorer at their old age than they are today. And that is, I think, for me, extremely important. That is being discussed, but people from the banking sector will know that this is not advancing very well, because there are some huge conflicts of interest. Finally, on reconstruction, I already said.
I will have to stop you and try to tell people to line up for the mic for questions, if there are any in the room.
But anyway, I was just going to finish on the point of reconstruction, which I've said already.
Okay, so sorry, but we want to keep 10 minutes for questions or comments, if there are any. If there aren't, I will give the floor back. So just to keep the room engaged. If there are any questions, please find your way to the mic.
Hello, Radu Pirecă from Wall Street, Romania. So I have a question for Natalia Gavghiliță. What is your pitch for Moldova? What is your pitch for investors? A very short pitch. How would you pitch Moldova to a potential investor?
And look at Jan, for that matter.
Actually, Jan is investing in Moldova. We had a very good working relationship, and hopefully this will lead to very interesting projects. We talked about balancing power and so on and so forth. So Moldova has been an outstanding performer in the last several years from all points of view. We have been faced with crisis, which we have dealt with in a way that changed Moldova's reputation abroad. But at the same time, while we were dealing with the largest refugee flow, stagflation, energy crisis, and blackmail, throughout the entire time, we did structural reforms. We did structural reforms in business, like deregulation, in various sectors, in public administration. And we have become candidate country to the EU. So even though we are seeing turbulent times now, we know that the outlook is good because all of these reforms will bring real benefits. The only risk is that we lose to Russian meddling. So the time is to come all of us together now, the public sector, the private sector, and civil society, to do our best and to act quickly and decisively so that these gains are not lost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for a very, very interesting panel. My question is for Mr. Lanu, if I understood correctly.
Ioana Petrescu, former Minister of Finance in Romania.
Thank you, Clara. You correctly stated that we are not saving enough for old age, and in general, that's true in Romania. However, there is also this structural problem in the financial sector that almost all the type of investments that Romanian can do is through the banks. So there are very few other alternative ways and institutions in which Romanians can put their money and invest. So what would be your suggestions for Romania to do to transform the financial sector and create more opportunities for Romanians who want to save and to invest, but outside the banking sector? Thank you.
I mean, you to look at the Nordic example, for example, Sweden or Denmark have set up pension funds, very pooled funds, not fragmented, and which are having, well, probably not this year in the case of Sweden, but which are over time, have a very good performance and guarantee, and that's we've published papers on this, you can find in all these statistics, if you see the national income per head, let's say at retirement, it's much higher than in any other country. It's mostly Sweden, Denmark, a bit Finland, the Netherlands, but then all the others, even Germany, is below the average of the EU, which is a pity. But the thing is just, what is being discussed in Brussels is an extremely important piece of regulation. We have insufficient transparency in the products which the banks offer to us, because the banks offer products to us which are in their interest, not in our interest, which is a fundamental key issue in financial regulation, the fiduciary duty. A bank has to offer you a product in your interest, not in its interest. And that's why, for example, the best thing you could invest in is an exchange-traded fund. But they are not advised by banks in Europe, which, by the way, it's a very popular product in the United States, not in Europe, because banks don't earn money on an ETF, because the average fee on an ETF is very low. So they earn much more on advising you an insurance product, which gives you 2%, 200 basic points, 250 for a bank to be paid to them, than an ETF where you pay 20 basic points or 25 basic points. So we need to have a more transparent financial market, a more integrated, consolidated financial market. I mean, a more European financial market than we have today. We have far too much juxtaposed capital markets, small markets, rather than an integrated European market where there is cross-border competition. Of course, that has been argued for 20 years, but we are not advancing. And that's why I said we need to have a new narrative to realize this. The banks far too much think, oh, we will lose revenues. We have at the moment in Europe the double of deposits as households as the United States. The United States has a double in investment funds as Europe. So if we say we reduce the cost for these funds, all of us will have many more Europeans investing in these funds than having their money on a deposit. And that will be much better, certainly after inflation.
Ian, you wanted to pick up on that question?
Yeah. One interesting stat. So Czech Republic is smaller than Romania twice. We have 10 million people, you guys have almost 20. But on not only relative and but also absolute terms, Czech customer has twice as many financial products not deposits, but real products than Romanian. So at the end, Romanian financial market is losing 4 times because, twice the size, twice less products. And this untapped opportunity, one way or another, this is what we are missing here, because you have 3 ways how to get money. Private deals, this is what we are doing, banks, and the markets. Markets in Central Eastern Europe are pretty illiquid, and as I just said, not enough financial instruments by retail. So even though I would love that each capital in Central Eastern Europe would have liquid, well-working, stock exchange and great local banks, but it's not happening. And it's not happening for 20 years. And that's why definitely capital union. And in the case of marketing, if there is one super successful case, it's definitely Moldova. Because you see, in last 2 years, your guys, you, Mr. Prime Minister, Maia Sandu, Igor Grosu, everybody is out and about, traveling every week, promoting the country and promoting the market. And I see it not only in our industry. My friend of mine, he is manufacturer of hospital beds. He started with a small deal, private deal in Chisinau, but then he was able to get with you guys, got a funding from World Bank. So these kind of, again, institutionals, privates, and the money from outside, this is needed. And it's not going well locally, as you rightly pointed out. So that's why we need to have some form of regional or pan-European harmonization. By the way, we are losing big time. London is number 2 globally, number 1 is New York, number 3 is Hong Kong. Now Singapore is pacing, and then Frankfurt. So even Western Europe does have a problem, not even talk about us.
If there aren't any other questions, I will ask you a quick follow-up question. How far are we, maybe all of you, how far are we from a better penetration of capital in Central and Eastern Europe and potentially Eastern Europe?
So while I appreciate all the kind words that you have said, thank you. At the same time, I want to say that a big constraint in Moldova is precisely risk capital. We have a very underdeveloped capital market, and only a handful of programs that provide risk capital, which means that a lot of enterprises are created with either own resources, own investment, or grants. And then, of course, we all know that there is the slump, and there are the constraints to growth. And only when enterprises grow, we know that we can create sort of more jobs, more value. So definitely, we need more risk capital. But then, who will invest? What are the ticket sizes? And we are constrained by our size, by the size of our market. So our strategy has been, well, how can we actually bring, this is where the single market can really play a role, but also, how can we bring our systems closer to Romania's, for example, so that companies can see us as sort of an access point to a much larger market. And this is where I want to stress the regional approach and how important that is. We will have sessions on we'll have sessions on reconstruction of Ukraine. I think only through a regional approach we can avoid competition with each other, and we can provide a win-win situation, because we will all be competing for labor force, for capital, and for resources. So, I can see inflation for construction materials, for example, continuing to be high. So if we do a regional approach where we prepare now for what we can do later, but we can prepare, in Romania, in Moldova, in the region, then we can alleviate some of the supply side constraints that might appear later. And again, this can be done while doing these reforms and developing capital markets and developing new ideas and innovation, integrating the labor force and so on. So I think we all need to come together and be very ambitious about what we can do.
So cooperation versus competition that goes to the extreme.
Yes.
Well, It's interesting word, risk capital. So do I believe that there will be VCs coming to Eastern Europe or techie IPOs? Probably not. I wouldn't focus on that. I would focus what you just said, and you also mentioned it. So we need regional approach, large capital intensive project, and use the momentum. Because now with reconstruction of Ukraine, money flowing also in Moldova, all to the region, regional approach, large, heavy infrastructure project, they are pretty safe. The size is right, it's not subscale. So if we are just talking about pipe from Greece to Moldova, it's billions of dollars. When we are talking about highways, about trains, definitely. A lot can be done also as a PPP project. So this kind of capital-intensive projects, they are good for everyone. There is no big competition between and among the countries because all of you need it. And to bring EBRD, EIB, and the private money, this is where I would start. It will strengthen the energy security, it will strengthen the infrastructure, logistics, and it's going to be good for us who are not in this kind of game like healthcare or media and telecommunication as well. And you mentioned example of Poland. I did the same about Croatia. How they untap the potential. If you see highways in Poland 15 years ago and now, the same about Croatia. So I think use the momentum right, that money is going here, that the big guys, Brussels, Washington, are looking on Central and Eastern Europe and untap this through big projects.
I'll take your question from the capital perspective of investment in healthcare. I mean, as I mentioned before, I think the system is underfunding. It's a systemic issue, right? And I think there are really good things happening about tapping into some of the funding coming from Europe. There are discussions around opening the funding to private sources, which I think is really interesting. And there are models happening in other countries. If you look at hospitals in Western European countries, the source of funding is not just public. They have funding from private insurance, they have funding for clinical trials that I mentioned before. So I think there are elements to complement that. And again, to overcome kind of some of the systemic issues that is happening today. I think all of you know that next year there are elections, 4 rounds. Vote for health.
I think I will end up with a happy tone. What is differentiating us, this area versus the Western country, is the behavior. While the Western countries are having a self-sufficiency and living the dream and not trying to enter too much in details. On our side, we are eager to catch up with the rest, with the Western countries, and this is the positive thing that we should rely on, except the funds, money, whatever. I mean, the positive attitude should be the first idea.
Yeah, what can I add? I mean, I think it's underestimated what funds are available, as you said, through the Next Generation EU, and then soon through these funds which will be there for making them ready for enlargement. I mean, from what I hear in Brussels, these funds are insufficiently used. Even in the bigger ones like Italy and Spain, which have enormous amounts, they cannot sufficiently absorb it. I think there is plenty of things to be done as well for healthcare, as well as for infrastructures, as well as for, I mean, green transition, digital transition. It's all there. But of course, you have to go through the administrative burden, and Brussels is a bit the judge for these things. We are also, as a think tank, participating in EU projects. We complain about all the administrative hurdles, but that's an administration. They have to be honest, they have to be open, they have to be accessible to everybody, and the rules are the same for everybody. And that's what it is, but it's a bit annoying. But there is plenty of money available, and that's what you certainly have seen in these countries over here. They've got these funds coming from Western Europe. Basically, most countries here are net receivers of EU funds. Western Europe are net contributors to the EU, just to make sure that what we call social economic cohesion is there, and that we can level up the wealth of these countries over here, which again should now happen most urgency with Ukraine, but also with Moldova. So I think overall, I mean, there is plenty of things which can be done. We just need to be positive and probably more European than we are.
Yesterday, we had a side event where we were looking at the amount of funding available for the reconstruction of Ukraine and regional cohesion. And we were discussing the fact that it appears the new instruments of blended finance, risk sharing, public-private partnerships look like the EU is trying to do more with less. But what I'm hearing today from the panel is that actually there's more on the table, and it's actually the process and the actors that need to do more to catch up with the available resources. And I think that is a fantastic punchline to finish the panel on. Thank you all so very much for joining me on this wonderful panel, and thanks to the audience for sticking with us in the afternoon.